Episode of the Thrive with Asbury Seminary Podcast. I'm your host, Heidi E. Wilcox, bringing you conversations with authors, thought leaders, and people just like you who are looking to connect where your passion meets the world's deep need. Today on the podcast, I got to talk to my boss, Deb Adams. Deb is the Communications Director at Asbury Seminary, and she's also an Asbury Seminary alum. On today's podcast, we talk about how she came to Asbury Seminary and how God called her to attempt something big when she and her family decided to found Gracie's Place, a therapy center for children with special needs in northern Wisconsin. So not only do they provide therapy services for these children, but they also provide training resources for the families. So we talk about how they got started and what they're doing now. And if you want, how you can be a part of their ministry. Let's listen. Okay. So I'm really excited to get to talk to you today, Deb. I have wanted to talk to you about your story for a long time because I've heard bits and pieces just because we're friends and you're my boss, so I like coworkers, but I hear about it. So I really wanted to talk to you and just get your whole story all pieced together for a long time. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
Absolutely.
So thanks for stopping in all the way from Wisconsin.
Whoop, whoop. Yep, it snowed there yesterday, so.
So tell me about Gracie's Place.
Sure. So Gracie's Place is a therapy center for special needs kids, and we started it it started as a nonprofit where we started fundraising back in 2016, and we fundraised for it for about a year, and then really opened it up the beginning part of last year for therapy. So we do therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy out of it. We do for kids with special needs, and we do mentoring for parents.
Wow.
So parents will come in. Yeah, so the mentoring for parents is pretty cool. So we'll have them come in. We'll do special programming with them. So we'll typically bring an organization that relates to special needs kiddos from the surrounding northern Wisconsin. They'll come in. They'll do kind of like a presentation for them. Because as parents of special needs kids, you don't really know what you don't know until people are like, oh, this service is available, or that services are available, or did you know this, or did you know that? And so so we'll bring folks in and kind of try to mentor and train families up, and so that they know what's available to them so they can help their kiddos. And the other thing that we do is try to connect families with families.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that they don't have to do it alone.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what kind of things do you, like when you mentor parents or families, what does that look like?
Yep. So for example, like the last one that we did last month was about, it's called an IEP. So it's a individual education plan. So I have a child with special needs. So my daughter Grace, and so we're talking about Gracie's Place. And so we founded it because of Gracie. So she's 9 years old and she has autism and ADHD. And so she has been on an IEP with the school system since 4K.
Okay.
Right. And even before that, we had people that were coming into the house and helping her, and we still had kind of a plan of attack for her. So we had a couple of folks that are parent advocates come in and really talk to the parents about what it looks like to advocate for your child in the school system, because a lot of times, especially if you've had kids like older kiddos that didn't have special needs, and so now this is your first go in the school district with a kiddo that really needs help, you don't know what to ask.
Right.
Like you don't know what's available. You don't know what your rights even are as a parent. So a lot of times the school districts are set up so that they don't necessarily, they're not thinking necessarily about, oh yeah, you should do this, that, or the other thing. They've got a whole wealth of kids. Sometimes they're, kind of told maybe not to tell what's available because it's going to cost them money. And if they recommend it, then they have to pay for it.
Right.
Sort of thing. So if they recommend physical therapy for my daughter Grace, they have to pay for that therapy. They have to figure out a way to pay for it, right?
Oh, so they're going to be less inclined to help.
So, right?
Potentially.
Yeah. At least that's the way that it's set up in Wisconsin. Now, I don't know every other state, so I'm familiar with our state. So I don't blame them, but what it means is that parents need to know what they can do. And so what we were trying to do is so we do that. So we bring in different speakers who can talk to them about those sorts of things, what their rights are, what what they may want to look into. Like, I didn't know there was such a thing as a extended education plan. So for Grace, that means that she can do summer school. And so that she doesn't, so for her, reading is a big deal, and she's learning how to read right now.
That's awesome.
I know.
It's like really cool.
It's actually really cool because she's learning words right now where it's been really hard for her to learn words. She's, she recognizes words. She's starting to read, but especially with autistic kids, they can lose things if they don't keep using them. So in the summer, like, we want to keep working with her. But at the same time, the school district now is stepping in, and they have somebody who will continue to read with her, work on her sight words with her, try to catch her up to the class. And so it's just stuff like that where I didn't know that until I sat in on a parent networking group, right? And somebody mentioned it, and I'm like, wait, we can do extended school year? What is that? Tell me a little bit more about that. And so that helped me as a parent, right? So it's not even just for other parents. This is for us. Like, we're learning as we go, sort of thing. So those are the types of things.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I think it's helpful.
And so needed.
And then the other thing is a lot of times, like, not all of the parents, but some parents just need help, and they have multiple kids sometimes. So here's what I didn't know, Heidi, is that some families, that, like, literally multiple children, or like all of their kids have special needs. Like, we have one, and that's hard enough. But when you're talking about 2, 3, 4 kids on the autism spectrum, or kids with autism and then a kiddo with Down syndrome, all in the same family, and you're trying to navigate that. I mean, it's hard, and it's costly, honestly. And so trying to help them get the support that they need with other families, and with other organizations, but then also, like, that day we always do like a meal after.
Oh yeah.
So that they can stay, so they can talk, but so also that we can feed them.
Yeah.
And then make sure, so it's always on a weekend, so we end up making sure that on a Saturday afternoon, they're also getting fed. So there's that too.
And it allows them the opportunity to fellowship with other families, because I don't have kids, but it's hard, I've been told, like, once you have kids, to, like, have a network of people, because your life can get so tied up. And I've got to, like, do this for my kids, and so you miss the adult company, especially when it's so much more work just to get through life. Yeah,
and then, like, just adults that understand what you're going through, too. Because a lot of folks can end up being kind of judgmental about it, like, why can't you control your kids? And we know their special needs, but really, sort of thing. I mean, you can get some pretty nasty looks when you're going through Walmart and your kid with autism just, it was too much for them, and they're having a meltdown, right? And people just think they're acting out. And what's really happening is that between the smell and the lights and the sounds, and there's too many people, it just completely overwhelmed their senses. And because they don't have a way to block that because of what they have, it just all comes in, and they can't filter it, and so they just lose it. And so people don't understand that unless, it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know until you walk through it. But so it's kind of like you have these people that get where you're at, sort of thing. So there's, so there's that. And then also it's cool because their kiddos come and play together. So when the parents are learning, their kids are invited, like their whole family is invited. So they're, neurotypical kids as well as kiddos with disabilities or whatever, come in, and we have folks that will play with them and hang out with them and watch them. And they can hang out at Gracie's place, and then we kind of come together in the foyer area where we can just talk and fellowship. And they have a pair of minutes just to sit down and not worry about the kiddos.
Which is so important.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So what does, if a child comes to therapy at Gracie's place, what does, every child would have different therapy needs, but what does that look like? Yeah.
So, we have it set up so that it's fun. A lot of ways kids learn, so especially autism is a social communication disorder, right? They don't know how to socialize. They don't know good boundaries. That a lot of them, can be nonverbal, depending on, the level of severity or whatever. And so a lot of it is play. It's play to get them to talk. And that's how most kids learn, is they learn by playing and how to interact with each other and whatnot. And they come alongside each other, and they kind of start to play individually, but then they start to play with friends as they kind of pair up and whatever. So it's teaching them how to socialize through play. And so it's just kind of a fun atmosphere. It's a neat, it's interesting because the actual therapy center itself is set up and just looks fun. It's just a fun place for kids to come. But what also has happened, and we didn't really realize this when we started, was that, in our heads, when we first started, our kiddo was 7, Grace was 7, and now she's 9. And so we had it in our head, well, this is what fun looks like for, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds and that sort of thing. Because that's where our heads are at. And we're parents, we're not therapists and whatnot. So we kind of set it up for that. But what's happened is that we have these 19-year-olds, these 20 years old, these 21-year-old people, folks that come in and they're still, they still have autism, right? So they come in, they have autism and they see it and their heart is still that of a child. And so they love it. So we're thinking that it's for the, the younger kiddos. And what we're finding is it's not just for the younger kiddos, it's for the older kids too, that still have this beautiful heart of a child that they just love it. They want to come and play too. So that's a lot of fun. Yeah. So, so at any rate, so they've come in, we have to we get a referral, from a physician. I'm the middle person who pairs up that referral with, one of our therapists. So I connect the parents with the therapist, and then they set their own schedule with regard to when they're going to come in. And it's basically an hour-long appointment, and whether it's occupational therapy, and so that's, fine and gross motor skills that they're working on, or it's speech therapy where it ends up being, more the socialization and play. It's all kind of relates to play, though. So it's actually, it's very cool. And so what we see, though, is that the kids progress year over year. And so, so my Grace right now has come so far, because when she first started, she barely had a handful of words.
Does she go to Gracie's Place?
Yeah, so she does. So we have her in speech therapy right now at Gracie's Place. And what's cool is that with her, we have we started this thing where it's group therapy, and we're going to be doing more group therapy this summer. But we started it with her and kind of piloted it. And we have a neurotypical buddy, like her best friend from school, comes with her every Monday. Oh my gosh, Heidi, it's so cool. Because she gets so much more out of her than anything that I can as a parent or the speech therapist can. So we've, the speech therapist facilitates it, but it's really about how do you take turns? How do you like pleases and thank yous and interacting with your peer and that sort of thing. And so we have the coolest kid in the world who is her buddy, who just loves her, like crazy. But she'll sit and she will get so much out of Grace, so much more than what I ever could, just as far as, Gracie, this is what you need to do. And so Grace does it, sort of thing, and so she learns a lot. And so anyway, it's just really cool. So that's just blown all of us away. Yeah.
It's a beautiful image, I think, as we're talking, I'm thinking of like the beautiful image of Christ, like coming alongside us. And as you were talking about play too, because even as adults, like we need to play, like it's part of our formation. And and Jesus tells us that we're supposed to be like little children, right? So, and so, that's what, honestly, the coolest part to me is that I see Christ, like in the kids. Like you see Jesus in the kid, and because like if you want to see Jesus, go to the margins, because Jesus is always at the margins, and these kids are marginalized in so many ways. And so much of Western worldview is about you're not relevant if you're not productive. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to be doing something, you have to be going, you have to be creating something, you have to be whatever, right? And so people will look at these kids and see them as unproductive or as draining because they need resources and whatnot, without ever seeing this beautiful childlike thing. Like I said, those 20-year-olds, those 21, they're like kids. They're still like children. So they're more like what Jesus calls us to be than we will ever be, right? Do you know what I'm saying? And so, God just loves them so much.
And so you see that with them.
Yeah.
Like you just see it. And so, so Grace and all these other kids that come through that we're trying to help, they impact their schools, and they impact their teachers, and they impact our therapists, in a way that other kids won't.
Yeah.
Right?
So true.
Because they see things in ways that we don't. Anyway. So yeah.
That's so true.
So Jesus loves them.
What gave you the kind of vision to start Gracie's Place?
Yep. Yep. So the vision for Gracie's Place was actually kind of a vision, really, because my husband and I were like, I was getting close to the end of my MDiv, and like, okay, so now what? Because we went in knowing that God was, like we were being called to something, but not necessarily knowing what that was, but just trying to be faithful and saying, okay, we believe right now he's calling me to seminary, so I'm going to go to seminary. And my husband was fully on board with that. And now we're getting to the end of it. And it's like, okay, God, so now what? Because we've been obedient here. Now what?
And the end of it would have been like what year?
Yeah, so I graduated in May of 2018. And so the spring of 2016, we had been talking to people about the idea of church planting. But it was like, okay, so what does that look like?
Yeah.
We felt like we were being called back to Wisconsin, but I don't know like what that looks like.
Yeah. Where it snows in May.
Where it snows in May. That's right. You got it. And so, yeah, so we were just praying about it. And I remember I was dropping Grace off at school right after a therapy session, because we were doing therapy in Lexington.
Okay, because you had moved down here.
Because we had moved down to Kentucky. So we were doing therapy in Lexington 2 days a week in the early morning, occupational therapy and speech therapy with Grace. And we were seeing such extreme progress with her when we started doing that. So she gained, like she was fairly still nonverbal. I mean, she had words, but she didn't know how to put them together and wasn't using very many of them. And so she was fairly nonverbal when she was 4. We started the therapy when I think she was 5. And when she was tested, she was at not even a 2-year-old level. She was at like, I can't remember what it was, maybe like 1 year, 9 months or something like that. So, and that's at 5.
Yeah. And that had to be hard for you and Pete as parents.
Right. Yeah. And so, it is, because you don't, and she gets frustrated at that time because she couldn't communicate what she wanted. And, so it was really hard. And at that point you're like, you don't know where she's going to be.
Right.
In 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, is she ever going to be able to speak? Are we ever going to have a conversation with her? Because at 5 years old, kids just speak.
And ask all kinds of questions.
They're asking questions that, so this is how bad it was, is that like something as simple as this is, I just remember it catching my heart. Like I gave her, I can't even remember what it was, like a piece of paper. And I'm like, Grace, can you throw that in the garbage for me? Kids at 5 years old don't even have to think twice. Kids at 2 years old typically won't have to think twice about what that means. She had it in her hand. I remember this at like 4 years old. She had it in her hand. She had no idea what I just said. So like receptively, she did not understand.
Yeah.
She couldn't take it in. But like most folks are set up so that they just learn by seeing what other people do and hearing, and they catch on. And her brain doesn't work that way. So for everything that she learned, I had to show her what that meant. So I'm like, and I didn't get that right away.
Right.
And therapy taught me that, no, you have to walk her through every step. Like every step. She doesn't understand the steps. You have to show her the steps.
And you might have to do it several times.
And you have to do it over and over and over until the connections are made. And so all of a sudden you're like, oh, I get it. So I'm like, okay, so Grace, let me show you what that means, right? So this is garbage, Gracie, and this is a garbage can. And so when I say, I want you to throw this into the garbage, here's what I want you to do. And I would have to take her by the hand and go, this is garbage. We're going to walk over here and we're going to throw the garbage in the garbage can, right? And then throw it in the garbage can. So she understands. And most kids just get that.
Right.
Autistic kids a lot of times don't.
Right.
Because they don't have it. And so at any rate, so if she's 5 years old and she's not even at a 2-year-old level, we started taking her to therapy in Lexington, and within a year she gained over a year.
Wow.
So she was almost at a 3-year-old level.
Yeah.
Within a year's time. So it's been huge. And even right now, like so they call them sight words, in school or whatever. So she's learning different words or whatever. And so she's in 3rd grade right now, but she's at a 2nd grade level.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's so huge.
Yeah,
right?
that is huge.
It's just huge. It is. I mean, it's huge. And I don't know what that means. And it's quite possible, and it probably is probable that she will always be with us. She probably, but I don't know what God will do. We don't know. She will probably always be with us. She will probably always be living with us. But I look at that, and now I have hope that she might at some point be able to be independent,
Yeah.
At least more independent than what she is now. And so I attribute a lot of that to therapy, like occupational therapy. She's actually in physical therapy at school now too. So she's just come a really long way, and therapy has been a huge part of that. And so when we started Gracie's Place, I'm sorry, this is being really long. So let me go back. So I had this vision.
No, you're good. I want to hear this.
Okay. So so we're asking God, like, what do we do here? What do you want us to do? And so I had taken her to therapy. I brought her back to school. So I'm bringing her to school and dropping her off. And I'm walking out, and I see like this vision in my head of this gym in Minocqua, Wisconsin, that I had been to before. And it was just like a really quick image, just this flash of it, of that. And then this flash of her in therapy, like in my mind's eye.
Wow.
I know. And so sometimes, not to sound weird or whatever, but sometimes that's how God speaks to me, is just like quick images.
Yeah. And I love how God speaks to everybody differently, too, in the way that they understand.
Yeah, and honestly, so I'm like such a visual person. So I feel like that's how he communicates with me, is quick flashes of things where I have to stop and go, okay, wait, what was that? And so I saw these 2 quick flashes of things, and so I'm like, wait a minute, I feel like that building has been for sale. Right.
Wow.
And so, and
so you were seeing real things.
So I was seeing real things.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of cool because God speaks to you in a way that you can understand, right?
Yeah.
And so Gracie's Place is not in that spot. But that's what started it. Seeing that, knowing it was for sale sort of thing, and going, wait a minute, does Northern Wisconsin need a therapy center for special needs kids? And so ended up talking to some folks, and ended up finally speaking to the first person who had ever stepped into our house to help us with Grace, who is now on our board as well. But I called her, and I'm like, Corey, here's what I'm thinking, and I don't know if it makes sense, but would something like this make any sense to you? Is there a need for a therapy center? And she literally said to me, this is a godsend. They're closing down the birth to 3 in our area right now. They're completely restructuring everything. We don't know what we're going to do. We don't know how families are going to get taken care of. We need your help.
Yeah.
Right. And so then we're like, okay. So subsequently just started doing some focus groups, driving up there on the weekends and taking some vacation time, going up and doing focus groups with people, with families, with area providers and organizations that dealt with special needs folks. And they're like, please come, please come, please come. We have nothing. It's a black hole. Like Madison, Wisconsin, the capital of Wisconsin literally said Northern Wisconsin is a black hole. When it comes to special needs kids, there's nothing. And so folks were having to drive an hour and a half to get some types of therapy, but always in those little doctor office rooms. That's where they were getting it. Or they would have, if they actually wanted to go to a therapy center specifically set up for special needs kids, they had to drive 4, 5, 6 hours to either Madison or Milwaukee.
And when you were in Lexington, you went twice a week when you were
I
here.
went twice a week. It was like a 20-minute drive.
Yeah.
And that was just one. There are like 7, 8 different places that I could have chosen to go to in Lexington. I just ended up choosing the one that was recommended to us. And so the parents had nothing.
Wow.
Yeah. So we decided to go. So it was pretty cool. And also I work for the seminary.
Yeah, you do. You're my boss.
And so how do you do that? So I'm like, God, what does this look like? Because we don't have jobs and we're not going to make any money and we're just parents. We're not therapists. So this can't be our income.
Right.
And so here's what's really cool about Asbury Seminary. You know, and I was actually totally scared to do this. I was so afraid to do this. To go talk to my boss and say, I think God's calling us to do this thing, but I don't know what this looks like.
Yeah.
And so what do we do? Because, oh my gosh.
That is a scary conversation.
It's a totally scary conversation. And so the other thing is that we weren't just thinking of it as a therapy center. We were thinking of it as a fresh expression of the church.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
And so there's that piece of it too. So we were still thinking church plant. So we're thinking therapy center, but with the therapy center, let's minister to the community where they're at and where they're needed and see what God does as far as creating a church that would be involved with Gracie's place. So we also have a church plant.
Wow. Okay, so I want to talk about that later too.
So yeah. So ended up having this. Okay, so this is how much Asbury actually is fully on board with what they teach, right? Because it's one thing to say, yeah, we're all for church planners and we're all for a fresh expression of the church and we believe in the kingdom of God and wanting to move forward.
Yeah.
And obviously they totally believe that, right? But now for me to be a staff person in the position that I'm in, going, okay, would they let me work remotely? Would they let me do some things remotely? Could I still somehow stay connected with the seminary so I have some sort of income, but do this thing that God's calling me to? Like firmly believe that at this point God is completely calling us to do this thing.
Right, because it's different to believe something and have something like classes about it,
and
then to actually put action, your organization to put action behind what they believe.
Yeah. So I go to my VP of advancement one morning, a bit frightened, going, I might be losing my job right now. Like seriously, I might walk in there and he might say, well, we appreciate you so much, but let's find somebody to come in and take your place. If you believe that God's calling you to this, then we fully support that, but we're going to have to do a search to replace you. And so, so I go in there going, okay, I believe that God's calling us to do this, Jay. I don't know what this looks like.
Yeah.
But it might look like me doing some, work here or there for you on the side, if you would be willing to allow me to, continue to help with the seminary. But God's calling us to this thing.
It was kind of your all-in moment.
Yeah. Like totally was.
Yeah.
And it was so funny, Heidi, because like prior to that, it had rained for like 4 days straight. You know how it is, Kentucky.
Yes, I do.
Like thunder, lightning, downpour for 4 days straight.
Yep. And you wonder if you're ever going to see the sun again.
Ever. Like ever. Seriously, you don't know. And so you think you're going to, but is it there behind those clouds? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so so I'm walking out the door, had this meeting set with Jay. I walk out the door and the rain stopped. Literally the clouds start to part. And I'm not kidding. And the sun started to shine and the clouds are moving back and the rain just like stops to like a trickle and then completely done as I'm walking across campus and the sun started shining.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like seriously.
You just felt peace at that moment.
I did. I'm like, I walked by, the banners and everything and I'm going past, whatever that is, the fountain. And I'm like, okay, God, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
This is for real.
Yeah.
And so I walked in and I'm like, nervous, but knowing, okay, whatever happens, like if he says no, if he says whatever, okay, it's going to be okay. And so I just laid it out and I'm like, yeah, and then maybe I could do this or that. And he like literally, Heidi, this is Jay. He grabs a sheet of paper, because I had some stuff written down. He flips it over and he starts writing, what would this look like for you to do your job from Wisconsin?
Wow.
Like for real.
Yeah.
Like not even batting an eye. He's like, okay, so how do we do this? What would this look like? Let's think this through, Deb. How can we do it so you can still continue working here, but you can do what God's calling you to do?
That is amazing.
It kind of is.
As you were talking,
it kind of is.
It's amazing.
Who does that?
Nobody does that.
Nobody does that.
But I was thinking about your all-in moment, and like I just kept thinking about Abraham and Isaac, and like you didn't know, and right. And so you were like, I'm willing to lose my job. I'm willing to lose everything, and then
Yeah.
to do what God wants me to do. And there was like a ram in the thicket, like Jay was
For
like,
real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I never thought of it that specific way, but that is it really. Yeah.
Like you were willing to sacrifice everything.
I was scared.
Yeah.
Like I was.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would be scared if I came to you and was like,
I
hey,
didn't
Deb.
Because you know what? Honestly, in the secular world, which is where I come from, that's okay, you're done here then.
Yeah.
We get it. We appreciate you, but you're done here and we'll find somebody else. And
Yeah.
you didn't do that. I mean, and that's Asbury Seminary. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't make that up.
No, you
right?
can't.
And so, but what's cool is that because I'm also the director of communications, I understand what it is to be a student. I understand what it is now to be an alumni. I understand what it is to be a church planter, right? And somebody who's doing a fresh expression of his church. So it actually only helped me to be able to do my job because I understand.
Yeah.
Because I totally, fully understand
Yeah.
what others are walking through, sort of thing. So just really blessed anyway by the seminary for that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then that happened. You knew you could work remotely.
Yep.
How did you get started with Gracie's Place?
Yep. So we already had a board of directors that had started basically the year before had started fundraising. It was like everything opened up as soon as I made that move. It was like God then just kind of parted everything, not just those clouds that day, and allowed me to work. But then it was like we found a place because we had also been looking for space and couldn't find anything up there to start it.
I remember those
days. Like what? Yeah. Right? And so it was just like shoom, and so it was almost like that act of obedience shook something loose. Which was kind of cool. So note to self, acts of obedience, shake things loose. Okay, keep that in mind. So then the stuff started opening up and we just started getting all the pieces in place to move.
Because you had to find a house,
We had to find a house. We ended up, it was really interesting because we still are looking for a house. We're renting right now, but the place that we're renting, we're so grateful for because we could find nothing. Like literally, we could find nothing up there. It's real hard in that area. And so the person that we got the space for Gracie's Place, my husband was up there trying to find us a house because we were ready to move.
Yeah. And I remember.
Yeah. And so it was really interesting because he was having a conversation with our new landlord for Gracie's Place. And the guy was like, oh, well, I just bought a house and we're fixing it up right now. And I was just going to flip it, but maybe you guys want to live there.
You're like, yes.
Okay. Yes, please.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've been staying there and, so God just kind of opened up door after door after door, which, so that's all really cool. There's also a lot of really hard stuff that happened. So I don't want it to be like, and the clouds part and everything is beautiful.
Yeah, it's not like you just snapped your fingers and it was okay.
So it took a while to get the house actually fixed up.
I remember that too.
Yeah, so those were hard times because it needed a lot of work sort of thing. And even though it was a rental, it needed a lot of work. And so we couldn't move in right away. And
and Pete was doing some of
Pete
that.
was doing it a lot by himself to start with. And we had, we have 2 kids. So trying to figure that out and staying with family and blah, blah, blah. So, I don't want, so here's what can be hard is you want to give everybody the highlight reel of all the beautiful things that happen. And so I don't want anyone to think that it's not going to always be easy.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's going to be hard. But God's always with you.
Yeah.
And so, because stories like that, it tends to be that way. Like here are all the beautiful successes that I've had.
Yeah, by
it was
the time
really
you get
hard.
to telling your story,
you're
not living through necessarily the beginning part of it.
You're not living through the valleys. And you tend to want to tell people the highlights, and that's kind of the way we do things.
Yeah.
Especially like social media and all that.
Yeah.
Facebook. I'm just going to show my best side. And
we're
not going to hear the junk, but there's a lot of junk.
Yeah. What was like a struggle you faced and how did you overcome that? Yeah,
one of the biggest struggles we had was I said, I'm a parent of a special needs kiddo. So I knew all the front end stuff about what I need. Like I knew I would need a referral, because I had to have a referral. Right. And I knew that we'd have to do evaluations because Grace had to have an evaluation. I knew, these sorts, I knew that people there would have to be some sort of billing because I would always get a bill.
Right.
So there would be that. But there's a whole bunch of back end stuff
Yeah.
As it relates to therapy and insurance and hospitals and clinics and blah, 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 that like no idea.
Right. It seems really complicated.
It's so complicated. And to try to find somebody who can do it, it took us well over a year to get a medical biller in place. And like I knew that I needed to look for one because that's what everyone told me. The therapist that we're seeing, Grace, actually helped us know what we needed to do.
Oh, yeah.
Before we left, gave us kind of like this list, and medical biller was at the top, and it took us forever to get one. So I'm trying to do that and not doing it well and not knowing what I'm doing and trying to get all that sort of stuff set up. And so that was a weight. That was a huge weight. So that was one of the biggest struggles and then like, it's always the not knowing what you don't know, like not even knowing the questions that you should be asking. Yeah. So if you don't know the questions to ask, then you're not going to get the right answers to a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So there was that. But like those sorts of things have been hard, or just like fear. Like fear is a huge thing for me. Yeah. And battling like wanting to just crawl under the covers sometimes and not get out. Like for real, like just being like, I can't do this thing. I started it, but now I'm going to look like an idiot because I don't know what I'm doing. And people are counting on us now. And how are we going to get the word out? And how are we going to fund it? And how are we going to make sure that people don't, because our goal has always been to never give a parent a bill. And so far we have achieved that.
How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, fundraising, and God just like steps in. Because, because a lot of stuff insurance won't pay for. Like people think, oh, insurance will cover that, or oh, they're on Medicaid or whatever, so insurance will cover it. No, they will not. Not unless you fight tooth and nail. And so we can't fight for every single family to get we're also parents of a special needs kiddo, and plus I work full time, and we're church planters.
Right.
So what we found is generosity of people.
So honestly, people fund Gracie's place so that people can come
to scholarship.
To scholarship.
Yeah.
People.
So basically, what we've done walks, we've done grants. People have just sent in money just out of nowhere that we didn't even know how they knew about us, and they just sent us money, sort of thing. And so God just keeps providing. So it's really interesting, Heidi, because I've like stopped worrying. I don't know if that's good or bad.
No, that's good. That's still huge.
Fundraising, like we still continue to do that. And I see the books at the end of the month going, okay, I have no idea how we're going to pay for this. Yeah. And then God does something and somebody sends something and I'm like, okay. So he just keeps funding it, which doesn't mean that we don't have to be smart.
Right.
Because we always have to be smart,
right.
And we keep having to move forward and keep talking as a board, okay, how are we going to take care of this? And we got to make sure we're doing that. And let's continue to let people know that this is happening. But like Autism Speaks just gave us a $5,000 grant specific for autistic kids.
That's huge.
Yep. Which enables us now to be able to make sure that we can do therapy this summer, because we have like a whole host of kids that are signing up for summer services because they won't be getting stuff through the schools all summer long, and their parents want to make sure. So we always have more in the summer than we do during the school year. Yeah. Yeah. So the biggest struggle, honestly, has been like the medical biller piece, there was that, but fear.
Yeah.
It's a huge, God, how is this going to even happen? I don't know how this is going to work, and to just be like, okay, so I have fear, but to then say, all right, we'll acknowledge the fear, but then know that God's faithful. Yeah. Sort of thing. Yeah. I don't know.
It can be overwhelming at times because it feels like it's just smothering you. Yeah, it can. And so like prayers of the saints are huge. People praying for us is really huge to like combat that. Word of advice for anybody starting anything, like this is to have a core group of people that are consistently praying for you, because you will have fear. I mean, at least maybe you won't. Maybe everyone else is just brave all the time, and it's just me who has a lot of anxiety about stuff. But at the same time, that God is just good. Like God's just good. Yeah, yeah. Yep. So, how did you know you were going to name it Gracie's Place? I mean, I know you have a daughter, Grace, but how did you know that was like the name?
Yeah, that's funny. Because I didn't. I was named. That was like my placeholder name. Yeah. Because I'm just like, we're doing it because of Grace. So here's the thing. There's no way we're doing it if we don't know a Grace Adams, right? Because we don't know what we don't know. So we So I'd always known there were special needs people. I had an aunt growing up who was at our house all the time who had Down syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
So, so knew intimately what it looked like to have a special needs person in my family, but at the same time had never been a parent.
It's different, yeah.
Of a special needs kiddo, never had to deal with the issues that relate to having a special needs kiddo, probably was judgmental of people at the store when kids were having meltdowns and whatever, and they look perfectly normal, but were probably autistic. And were being bombarded by every, sensation that was coming at them that they couldn't filter. And so anyway, so at that point, I'm calling it Gracie's place because Gracie is who I know.
Yeah.
And have grown with as she's grown. And so then we had this board that we had started, and I was talking to them about, okay, so now what are we going to name it? And they're like, well, it's Gracie's place. And I'm like, I know, but what are we going to name it? Because I wasn't going to name it after her, in my head. Why would we call it that? We got to call it something, whatever. And they're all like, no, it's Gracie's place. Yeah. The reason that we're doing it is because it's Gracie's place. It wouldn't be Gracie's place without Gracie, because it wouldn't be here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's named that because it wouldn't be here without her.
Does she know she's a celebrity? Does she know it's her namesake?
No, I don't think she does. Honestly, I don't. But isn't that funny? And so there again, just to go back to that thing about productivity.
Mm-hmm.
If there's not a Gracie who some would see as unproductive, there wouldn't be Gracie's place. Right?
Yeah, right.
And so how much more productive does this child need to be?
Because she's touched hundreds of lives.
She's touching so many lives right now. And she does, whether she knows it or not, it wouldn't. And that's the case of so many people that have had kids with special needs, right? Is they're the ones that get it. And so now they're the ones that stand in the gap because they're like, oh my gosh, I need this. And if I need this, others need this. And so this needs to happen.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you see a need and then...
And you fill it.
Yeah.
Because somebody has to fill it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know your logo is like a caterpillar and butterfly.
Who made that beautiful logo? It's like the most beautiful logo ever.
It is pretty great. But I love that imagery though. So talk to me about why you picked that imagery and why that's important.
Yeah. So because
I think you had a walk too, maybe a year ago
and we released butterflies.
Yep.
So that's our desire is for that to happen, that the little caterpillar turns into this beautiful butterfly that can fly, right? And so it's the metamorphosis that can happen. And I think it, and I don't think it just happens through the therapy, although I do think it happens in the therapy, right? That they learn and they grow and they develop and they start to develop these bonds with each other and with other kiddos and that sort of thing. But I think it happens for the families too. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think, when I first looked at it, I thought of it as, this is kind of specific to the kids and our desire is for them to get the help that they need so that they can flourish. So it's that idea of flourishing and becoming more than what you ever thought that you could become. But I feel like it's doing that for the parents too. And so the desire is not even just for the kids, but for the parents. And then even more so for a community to be transformed.
Yeah.
So I feel like the more I sit with it and the more that the Lord, I feel like, is teaching me, here's what I want you to do in this community, is community transformation that he's looking for. So it's individual, and then it's family, and then it's this corporate thing, and it's these rings that go out. And so even now with this, the group therapy thing that we're trying to do, we're also looking to develop that even further into this whole therapy that can be done as a cohort. So with a neurotypical kid and kids with autism or some other developmental disability, but now we have several of them. So say we have 5 kiddos with developmental delays or disabilities, and then you have 5 that are neurotypical, and we create this cohort. So this is the goal.
What do you mean by neurotypical?
So neurotypical are kiddos that don't have developmental disabilities. They don't have autism. They're just, they're just typical kids.
Okay.
So that's a good question. And so, have them alongside of each other. And so the idea being, so here's our dream that we're looking at right now to move further out into the community, is to have therapy sessions where they're going kind of theme by theme, month by month, and they do with STEM learning, science, technology, engineering, math learning, or even STEAM where you throw art in there as well. And they go from kind of station to station and they get therapy. So they're getting occupational therapy or physical therapy. They're moving their bodies. They're putting their hands in like rice and beans, to get the sensory stuff that they need. But they're also going to learn science. Or we're going to wrap it around some sort of environmental learning, or like there's fish hatcheries up by us, if they're going to learn some sort of thing about biodiversity or whatever. So some sort of technology thing, whatever. And so you have different themes for each thing. And then we marry that up with a specific organization within northern Wisconsin. So like working with a tribe with their fish hatchery, or working with a place called Trees for Tomorrow, where they learn about, trees and the environment and that sort of thing. There's a planetarium up there, so learning about stars or that sort of thing. Yeah. So there's all kinds of different spaces like that where we could do themes, have them go through therapy with their neurotypical cohorts, right? So now here's what's happening. They're getting therapy. They're learning about science, technology, engineering, math, which a lot of autistic kids especially are geared towards in their brain, right? So therapy, but now they're doing it socially because they're doing it in a group, and they're not just doing it with other kids that have autism. They're doing it with the neurotypical kids too. So it raises the bar on them socially and communicatively wise, right? So they're doing that. They're moving their bodies. They're putting their hands in things. They're learning by feeling and touching and experiencing.
So it reinforces everything.
And now we take them out into the community to the fish hatchery, right? And so they saw it here and they felt it here and they kind of learned it here, and creating curriculum here. And now we're going to take it out. And then we're going to take them with their buddies, and they're going to learn it here too, and see it and feel it and touch it here. So now they're out in the community. So they create a cohort that's going to go with them year by year, and then plus they get out and they go to these different places in the community. So it's conceivable that they may end up having jobs at the end of this as they grow up into it. 4 and 5 and 6 years. Plus they'll have friends. Plus the community will know them, and that is the transformation part of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so everybody knows that we're doing this because we love Jesus, but it's this need.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's this need that these kids have. And so we love the kids. Jesus loves the kids. We're going to give them what they need, but we're going to do it in community so that they're not alone. And then it just like rings out into more of the community. So now we're going to take them out into the community. So it's like, because like that's what Jesus did. He met people where they were at in their deepest need, and then he fulfills that need, and then he talks to them about the kingdom, because that's what the kingdom looks like. So we're trying to just play in the kingdom of God, sort of thing. I don't know, like God's there with these kids, and so I just want to be where God is, right? So if Jesus is with the kids, I just want to be with the kids because that's where Jesus is, and these kids are awesome, and so it's this win-win. And then you bring them out in the community, and the community sees these kids, and it's just this beautiful thing. And then you teach the community about the kids, and the kids learn from them, and they learn from the kids, and they, end up getting more than they ever thought because of their interaction with these kiddos. Yeah.
How have you seen the metamorphosis transformation in your own life?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. You have to lay a lot of things down. You don't know how much, so you don't necessarily, I didn't know necessarily how much I was picking up that I thought, were good things, until God kind of gives you, no, I want you to pick up these things. So you're going to have to lay those things down because you can't carry them both. You can't carry all of your stuff that you think and then carry my stuff because your arms aren't that big. So I think there's just a lot of laying down the good for the better, maybe. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense, Yeah, like dreams that you're kind of like, oh, I could do this or I could do that or blah, blah, blah. Like we didn't plan on having a special needs daughter. that would not have been in my plans. Who would plan for that, right? You want all of your kids to be happy and healthy and perfect and no struggles for them ever and their life to just go swimmingly.
Yeah, totally.
Just like you want your own life to always go swimmingly and never suffer and never struggle for anything. Especially in the Western world, I think. And we think that if we are suffering, that there's something, unusual or wrong.
Right. We think we deserve something.
Yeah, like somehow we
better.
deserve to get a pass on the suffering part that Jesus talks about. Somewhere I think that might be in the Bible.
And we look at others who seem to have gotten a pass because we look at their Instagram page.
And they think that everybody, if they're not struggling, why should I have to struggle? And most people are suffering in some way. You just
even if
don't
their
know.
Instagram is perfect.
Right. Yeah, for real. Probably even more so if their Instagram is perfect, maybe. So I think that I've had to lay down the life that I thought I was going to have, but the life that I thought I wanted for the life that's harder. Like, for real, it's harder. But better.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. But beautiful at the same time.
Like it is. It's really beautiful. And it's so beautiful to watch like a community respond to it and people coming out of nowhere to help. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And also, so like to go to the church plant piece, like doing this thing for Gracie's place, we don't have a big church plant. I mean, we have 14 people coming to our church.
That's 14 people who probably weren't going to church somewhere else.
Right. Right?
Right.
And so it's just like, it's a big deal for folks to know that we do this because it's Jesus. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it gives us this credibility in the community. Like it immediately, like upon entering the community, gave us credibility in the community that there's no way we could have had if we just walked in and said, yeah, we're going to do a church plant in Minocqua, Wisconsin. And hey, y'all, we're here.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. And then just started trying to gather people. I mean, when you're in the newspaper and people are writing stories about you and people are talking to each other about, did you hear what they're doing over here?
Yeah. Because you're doing filling a need.
We're fulfilling a need.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where there's churches in town. You know, I mean, we're not the only game in town. I mean, the Bride of Christ is there. And a lot of them are doing some really cool things.
Yeah.
But they weren't doing this thing, you know, and there's a huge need for it. So it just gave us this automatic, hey, I think they're probably okay. Sort of thing. Yeah.
So does your church plant meet in Gracie's place?
It does now. Yeah, we were doing it in our house for a while, and now it was really cool. Again, our landlord, who is pretty awesome, I was talking to him one day about the idea, because as we are kind of growing this idea about the STEM learning thing and trying to write grants for it and whatnot so that we can kind of get it off the ground, I'm like asking for quotes on different areas of this lower level that he has, because there's a whole bunch of space available.
Yeah.
And then I said, and by the way, we have our church that has been meeting in the house, and could we meet? Would you be willing to let us rent just on Sundays a spot that we could have, and then we'll do children's church at Gracie's place and have a spot to do regular church? And he's like, well, you can just do it. You don't have to pay it. You don't have to pay me, And so
nice.
I know, he's so awesome. And so the first of the year, just after the first year, we started meeting in this really cool space that allows for coffee.
Nice.
Because you have to have coffee. And worship, and so it's a really cool worship space that we have. And then when it's time for the kiddos to separate and do children's church, then they go into Gracie's place and do it there.
Cool. Yep. So, and you're preaching every Sunday. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So actually using my MDiv, which is good. So it's been really cool, and we're trying to do it a little bit differently as well, because we're really trying to not just preach, but which is good, so we'll do worship and we'll have time of like preaching, but then also this time of formation that we do
what does that look like?
Yeah. So it looks like, I had a lot of spiritual formation classes, with like Reg Johnson, and mostly with Reg. Well, with Steve Siemens, several with Steve Siemens too. I know. And so trying to incorporate what they would do in their classes as well, which is like even just showing like talking and preaching. So for example, did the, calling of looking at Matthew 4 and the calling of the disciples. So Peter, Andrew, James, and John, right? And so preaching on that, but then at the end of that, just putting up an image that kind of shows that calling, that call in the miraculous catch of fish, even from Luke. So that was kind of the image that I showed them. And I'm like, okay, and then I just kind of walked them through, okay, so now imagine you are in the boat. Yeah. Imagine you are like smelling the air, and seeing the birds flying as you're, catching the fish, and they want some of that. And Jesus is in the boat, and you're Peter saying, depart from me, sort of thing. Those are like, what are you? Are you the people on shore that Jesus had been preaching to? Are you in the boat with Jesus? Are you in the, that boat, or are you in James and John's boat? Are you, so like asking questions of where are you at with Jesus, sort of thing, so that it's an experience for them. Because I can preach all, day long about stuff, and I will have sat with the Lord and asked the Lord, what do you want people to learn on Sunday, and, do inductive biblical, study through the text, and, and have, my 3 points, and do all that, and do the preaching thing that you do, and you learn here, and whatever. But that's me and God. And then I'm going to give you what God gave me, right? Sort of thing. And something about that wasn't feeling necessarily right. And so I want to do that. I also want them to get what God gives them. Yeah. So that so they hold it. Resonates with them, Yeah, because I hold what God gives me. And I feel like formed more and more. I feel formed because I feel like the Holy Spirit is speaking to me. But if they're not sitting with the Holy Spirit, intentionally in doing that, I want that formation to happen for them. And I don't know how else to do it other than to force them. I shouldn't say it that way. Think about it. That's exactly it. To invite is a better word. So like invite them to, and I've talked to them about this. I'm like, I want you guys to be formed the way that I feel like the Lord is forming me while I sit with him learning this. And I don't know that you can do that with me just saying these things to you that I feel like he's taught me. I feel like you need to have that invitation. It's a perfect word, yourself. Yeah. And so I keep trying to incorporate that sort of thing now into what we're doing, because we're small enough. Yeah. So we don't know any better. We can just do it the way we want to do it, and so. Which is great. So that kind of feels cool. So I'm trying to incorporate just like things like that into it more, so that the invitation is not just my invitation that I'm giving now at the end, here's what you can do to incorporate this, but to actively have them participate in a incorporation while we're there on Sunday. Right. To have their own relationship. So they have an experience. Yeah. So they have a relationship experience with them right there with the Holy Spirit there on Sunday, so that they're transformed. So I love that. I know. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. I don't know that I'm doing it well or right. So that's another one of those things where I'm like, God, so there's fear involved, because this isn't the way you're supposed to do it. There's I don't think there's a right way. I don't think there is. Yeah. I think the right way to do it is the way that God's calling you to do it. And so I'm trying to be cognizant of that. And what is the Holy Spirit telling me right now in this instance that will help the families that are there, our family of believers. How long have you had the church plant as part of Gracie's Place? Yeah, so we've always, so we weren't sure how to incorporate it. Right, because at first I think it was just Gracie's Place, It was Gracie's Place, and then we started with small group, and then it was like the day after it felt like I graduated that we started actually doing like Sunday at our house. Yeah, I remember that, Yeah, and then just like, I think maybe the last week in January, first week in February, I felt like the Lord was just saying, okay, so now let's try to start marrying these two together. So it feels like this is the way we're doing that. And so now I'll post stuff on our Gracie's Place Facebook page saying, hey, we're going to have church on Sunday at Gracie's Place, sort of thing. And it's pretty cool how many people are like, oh, that's so cool that you're doing, and whether they come or not, that they understand who we are and why we're doing what we're doing, because sometimes we can look at it and go, well, there's hardly anybody coming and blah, 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 blah. I just don't, if I'm hoping to get to 20, and if I stay at 20,